Okay, great. Well, let's jump in. So today we're hoping to cover a little bit about platform engineering and engineering enablement and what that means at your organizations, how artifact management fits into that, and then Antoine, as you detailed, how you go about selecting the right artifact management platform for your organization, what implementation of that looks like and how you manage change within your organizations, and then what are the benefits you've seen since you've moved to cloud native artifact management. So to kick us off, I'd love to understand a little bit how within your organizations you think about platform engineering and DevOps. Rob, you mentioned engineering enablement. I'd love to just understand a little bit about how you think about those concepts internally and what they mean to your organizations.
Yeah, so I think with engineering enablement, we're a kind of a group of about, I think it's 8 teams at the FT, and we look after a whole bunch of shared capabilities that we provide to our kind of engineers. And so that includes things like, managing cloud services to DNS, TLS certificates, CDNs, observability services, those sorts of things. And so that this group sort of evolved from essentially that a collection of teams that lived in the organization previously but weren't kind of unified under this sort of enablement banner. And so about 3 to 4 years ago, we came together and kind of started to kind of on this journey of essentially providing this sort of set of or suite of core engineering capabilities that the engineers can lean on to hopefully get stuff done more easily, more safely, quicker, those sorts of things.
Yeah, Rob, was there a tipping point or what do you think led to that formation of the engineering enablement function within the Financial Times?
What led to it? I think, well, there's always been a need for some of these things. So some things naturally look like shared services within engineering organizations. And so you've got whether you explicitly look after, say, I don't know, GitHub, and your kind of use of GitHub or a continuous integration platform or whatever, someone in the organization is looking after those things. I think it's when we got to it, we kind of found that we've gone through this kind of big journey over the last sort of decade. So things like adoption of microservices, moving to the cloud, adoption of DevOps, lots of automation, and teams have had a lot of sort of autonomy to do, use the technologies they want to use to get the job done. But that's not come without issues. And so we've ended up with, over the years, lots of different technologies you can use across the FT. And things like governance and security get harder. And we kind of just heard over time that engineers were kind of frustrated with how many decisions they were having to make, how much stuff they were having to look after. And they kind of got to the point where they said, we want actually to be a bit more constrained with some of these things that aren't really making a difference to our lives. And so that's really where we kind of sort of like, we really need to focus on these pain points that exist within that kind of engineering community. And that's really the motivation was we were hearing lots of people with, we were kind of seeing teams spinning up their own kind of almost mini platform teams within their groups to solve some of these problems. And so we could see sort of slight sort of things that were indicating that, we needed to focus much more on this.
Yeah, great. And Antoine, what does that look like at Topicus? How did you get to the point of looking at Cloudsmith and evaluating some centralized tooling within Topicus?
Yeah, so this kind of became an important decision for us when we were kind of noticing that we have one of those dreaded shared Nexus instances where everyone is just like a black box. You throw your images, your stuff there. Is there life cycling? And there's someone managing multiple hours per week, increasing like disk. And that person would just like, let me do my work, let me write software. So we kind of realized like, hey, we should focus on our core business, which is writing software that has like impact on people, their life, healthcare applications. And it's not increasing the disk for a Nexus instance or a Jenkins instance. So then we kind of realized the way to go is probably to get a hosted solution and a software as a service. So we set up an internal group to kind of think like, hey, what are our requirements? Who are the stakeholders? And just some basic competitive analysis, like what do we want and what fits our needs, and that's how we ended up here.
Yeah, that's great. So a few good threads in both those answers. So for Topicus, really emphasizing getting your developers back to delivering your business's software instead of worrying about everything else around that. So fully managed SaaS was important for you. And then Rob, you touched a little bit on, as you give autonomy to those developer groups, you lose some of the governance and control. So how can you both enable developers, but also make sure that your organization has the security and control that it needs over certain tools and over your software artifacts? So that's great. I'd love to understand a little bit, Rob, when you brought that team together, how you prioritized and decided what sort of tooling you were going to look at, and what the evaluation criteria was when you went into that evaluation.
Yeah, we went and interviewed a lot of engineers initially. We kind of mapped out the tooling that they were kind of using, and we could see when we kind of stepped back, we could see like almost the disparity of, there were multiple different CI/CD kind of technologies in use. There were kind of, we used Nexus, and some people weren't using Nexus by choice. They were kind of pushing to public registries because they found that just less painful. But obviously there's trade-offs and consequences to those sorts of things. And so yeah, we basically did this mapping exercise where we kind of interviewed teams and kind of worked through, okay, what do you use, what programming languages do you use, where are you storing code, where are you storing your packages, images, all this sort of stuff, and just had a big conversation, then mapped that out, and then aggregated that up to, we did it for one of our internal technology groups. And that proved quite insightful, and it certainly allowed teams, we kind of got some sentiment about whether teams would like recommend these tools to other people versus they thought it was a really poor option, where their pain points were, what they wanted to try, that sort of thing. So just kind of getting a feel for what was in use and where people were struggling, really. That was where we started.
Yeah, that's great. So out of that survey and out of those discussions with engineering groups, you identified you wanted to implement a centralized artifact management platform. What was important to you out of the solution that you would ultimately choose for that?
Yeah, we were running Nexus on a little EC2 instance in the cloud, and it was, we had those issues Antoine mentioned about, having to, increase disk volumes and things like that. Having to patch it and upgrade it and, secure it, do things like, SSO is painful. There's a bunch of challenges with the existing solution we had. So when we were looking at something new, we already had a pretty good idea of how we ideally what we look for in a kind of one of these centralized capabilities. We have a bunch of principles that we attach to them and kind of look for. And key to that is really, one of them is really like we can adequately own it and support that service internally, and provide a good kind of experience for our engineers. And so that was really where we started. So both the sort of developer experience of the tool, can they get started easily, security is ever present, those were the sort of top of mind kind of criteria we were looking for.
Yeah. And Antoine, you mentioned going through an evaluation process. What were key criteria that you were looking for in an artifact management solution?
Yeah, so when we started to look for an artifact management platform or solution, we kind of just grabbed every solution we could find online. So we grabbed JFrog Artifactory, GitHub Packages, Azure, Nexus, the stuff Amazon has, which they don't really seem to care about. And we just checked like, hey, can you store data in the EU? Is the customer support, is it in the same time zone? We had problems with that one before where the support's in a different time zone and you just can't really seem to get in touch with each other quickly. So does it support SAML, infrastructure as code, vulnerability management, and of course, costs. What's the cost of the storage? What's the cost of the bandwidth? And then we kind of ended up narrowing it down to just GitHub Package, Artifactory, and Cloudsmith. So we just started creating a test plan, like these are requirements, so what do we want to test? And GitHub Packages kind of fell off immediately. It's practically just a big hard drive where you can store things, and that's where it stops. And actually, in the first initial tests we did, Artifactory managed to beat Cloudsmith by a few points. And it was about caching, the Terraform provider for Cloudsmith being quite new and no image duplication. So then we set out to meet with both parties, and in the end, as you can see, we chose Cloudsmith. Partly because of the cost effectiveness, but also because they promised the features we were missing, that they were on the roadmap and soon to be added to Cloudsmith. And we just felt the Cloudsmith people were more in touch with us. We had a better feeling with them. It felt like we were a partner and not a customer, because other options, we felt like, hey, you purchase our software and we give something in return. It's like really, but Cloudsmith felt like we're working on something together and starting a partnership, which felt good. So I had to go back and convince my colleagues, like, hey, for now, Cloudsmith is scoring lower, but I think in the future it will be better. And you know the famous saying, never buy software based on the promise of future updates. And I did the exact opposite, which is kind of a bad practice, I admit. But 1 year later, Cloudsmith delivered all of their promises. And they even added more stuff that we had in the test plan, which now puts them actually head and shoulders above the other options in our comparison. So that's how we ended up with Cloudsmith.
Yeah. Thanks for that additional color there, Antoine. That was great. Go ahead, Rob.
I can concur. I mean, we had a similar experience when we were doing the evaluation. I think the level of support and engagement we received during the kind of trial was excellent from Cloudsmith. And yeah, we kind of felt that, JFrog and Artifactory and their platform, there's a, it's been around for a long time. It has a huge feature set. We actually felt it was too cumbersome for our needs. There are too many knobs and dials you could use to configure things, and so we found that for our needs, the sort of feature set of Cloudsmith was a good fit, and we're just really impressed with the engagement we had.
Yeah, so there's a few things that each of you mentioned there that I just want to call out. So making sure that you had a partner in the platform that you were choosing. Antoine, you also mentioned the Terraform provider. So I think we'll get in a little bit around implementation and how you drive adoption, but being able to have that automation around there. You also mentioned SAML, so user management, and are they going to make this easy for me? Do they have the integrations I need to be successful? I think that was really important as you guys were evaluating. One thing I didn't hear, but I do think was a consideration for you, Rob, was around governance and control, things like license evaluation. How much was that a consideration when you were looking at your artifact management solution, things like open source license, what licenses are in use, vulnerability management, things like that?
Yeah, we have a kind of I put together like a secure package management strategy that we were kind of looking for, and kind of having a universal package manager as part of that problem, but also things we were concerned about were things like open source and with the EU Cyber Resilience Act coming down the line, things like SBOMs and kind of understanding kind of what we are using and what's deployed out in the world. So those sorts of things were kind of certainly important. I think our maturity is still low in terms of kind of making sure that we're kind of we know, for example, there are some open source things we would rather not be using because of the kind of terms that they apply and things like that. So we and particularly around vulnerabilities, it's a big area. There's an active kind of big initiative going on internally at the FT to try and make vulnerability management better, because it's just really hard. There's just too many vulnerabilities, too much noise. It's really hard to triage. Actually kind of helping engineers solve the real problems is just a massive problem. So yeah.
Yeah, so evaluating for your artifact management needs, but also having an eye towards how is our organization going to mature and grow in the software supply chain space as well, and making sure you picked a tool that would help in both those areas. Definitely,
yeah. I think the fact that there's kind of capabilities embedded within Cloudsmith is certainly a plus, and the fact that that's easy for engineers to kind of go and kind of access is also a plus.
Great. So I want to talk a little bit about implementation and rollout. So once you've decided that cloud native artifact management is an important part of your centralized tool chain, now you have to actually get teams to adopt and use that, use Cloudsmith and use that new solution. So what did rollout look like within your organizations, and how did you help drive adoption within your engineering teams? Antoine, maybe you can take that first.
Yeah, sure. We kind of approached the implementation in kind of a maybe unique, but also really simple way. And that is just automate everything, the whole process, user onboarding, team creation, just write a very good documentation and be very transparent in the progress. So we were kind of thinking, how do we communicate this to the teams? And we just ended up with just all of the documents we wrote, all of the meetings we had with the group for doing the competitive analysis, and just all of the comparisons and all of the numbers, all of the pricing, we all just made it public in our organization. So developers could just read what we are doing. It was a very transparent progress. And I think it's very important to do that, to involve your stakeholders, which are the developers, early on in the process. And if you announce the change very early on and they see the progress, you can share a timeline with them and they kind of know how to mentally prepare for it. And I think the most important part is don't force the teams. Don't be like, you have to go here by this date. I think if you make the transition very smooth and natural, you always have to show the other party what's in it for them, show why they have to migrate. And I think if you have the good documentation, you have all of the transparency, I think they kind of just start talking to us like, hey, we're on Cloudsmith, we have these cool new features. And then the other team is like, hey, I also want that, and the ease of sharing and all those stuff. So we kind of did the implementation in a very natural way, which ended up working out for us. So that was very nice.
Yeah, Antoine, that's great. So enabling some self-serve for those teams. What did the timeline look like for rollout at Topicus?
I think the first team, which is my team, of course, because I'm the one rollout, I go to my PO and be like, hey, can you put this on the top of the backlog? So I think within deciding to go with Cloudsmith and actually my team using it, and of course, there are some differences for like all of our Maven packages there and then all of our Docker packages there. But I think in just 1 month, 2 months, we set up the whole, all of the stuff, all of the documentation. And it's very easy because you don't have to write the big blog, we're going to do this, because you've been transparent from the beginning. So it's already there and you don't have the big bang, but the natural flow. So I think around 2 months, and then teams started flowing in and migrating on their own speed.
Great. Rob, how did Financial Times manage rollout and implementation and encouraging change within your organization?
Yeah, so I think initially the setup of things like, how you're going to do IAM and laying out teams and access and repositories, that was, we take a little bit of time, but similar, 6 to 8 weeks, something like that, 2 months, to get the kind of basic Cloudsmith configured the way we wanted it to do. We worked with colleagues at Cloudsmith to help us do that. And then we've basically been going ecosystem by ecosystem. So, we started with Python, that was close to home. That led us into the data science kind of ecosystems. So we were looking at R and Conda in addition to Python then. And then we had some ad hoc requests for sort of Terraform, and then we've now into Maven and Node and Docker and those sorts of things. So we're still kind of rolling out ecosystem by ecosystem, and kind of we've hit all the big ones now. But there are one of the nice things about Cloudsmith, obviously, is its support for lots of different package formats and ecosystems. So as teams see that they can use it and they go, oh, we can use it with Helm charts, then they start to organically use that. We have what's the word? We kind of paved the road a little bit with so we use Circle CI as our sort of de facto kind of continuous integration tool, and so we've implemented some what are called orbs in Circle CI, some essentially bits of code that make the kind of integration with Circle CI very, very simple. So we lean on the OpenID Connect support within Cloudsmith. So we don't need to store long-lived secrets and keys within pipelines and things like that. So that's really nice. So an engineer just adds a couple of lines to their pipeline configuration, and they're pretty much configured with npm or Maven or Python to kind of hook up to Cloudsmith. So try to make it, because we have so many teams and so many pipelines, that's the challenge. When you've got 1,000 pipelines that potentially need some change, some of them are templated, some of them aren't. You kind of, it's quite a bit of effort, and then also helping engineers to update their laptop configurations. To use Cloudsmith as well is also, we've put a bit of effort into tooling to help them do that as well.
Yeah. So Rob, in that migration strategy and rollout plan, was most of that self-serve for the development teams, or did they rely on your team to get set up?
Most of it has been self-service, bar kind of initially kind of granting access to the application, which is done via kind of our service desk. Then it's all kind of seamless via kind of SAML integration, that sort of thing. They get set up in the appropriate team and get access to the repositories they need. That's all pretty much self-service. We have been doing onboarding sessions with teams just to give them a bit of a demo and basically to be quite clear about what we're expecting of them. So it's like, you do need to upgrade your pipelines, this is how you do it, and you do not need to configure your laptop, and this is how you do it. So just kind of walking teams through things, and then if needed, we're going out and kind of pairing with engineers to actually do some of those updates, so they kind of feel confident that they can use Cloudsmith. One of the nice things we've done is we've just configured upstreams to point at our old legacy kind of package manager. So in theory, they can just switch over to using Cloudsmith, and there's no package migration per se that's needed. They just kind of pull the package via Cloudsmith that goes up to, in our case, Nexus, and pulls any packages it needs.
Yeah, that's great. So since you've made the change to a centralized artifact management solution, or Antoine, in your case, to a fully managed SaaS cloud native solution, what are some of the benefits you've seen within your organization? Antoine, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, definitely for us, the biggest benefit is the common language, the speaking the same language with your colleagues. So we noticed that the collaboration and the barrier to entry really lowers if you're all speaking the same language. And what I mean with that is, if someone has trouble, he just stands up, walk to the team next to them, which is also using Cloudsmith, and they can ask, hey, how are you doing this? How are you doing that? Then the other colleague opens their config. You say, can you send that file to me? And you just copy paste it, edit some parameters, and you're off to go. And I think it has a really, really big benefit of that common language, that you can just, everyone can help and everyone's on the same level. And I think that's really, really valuable for us in our organization. And the automatic onboarding through SAML and Terraform is amazing. Since we have set it up, I have almost never had to intervene manually. And it's a really big change, because before we had like this big Slack channel where people are like, this is my email, I need access to this repositories, can someone do this? And now it's just completely set up through IDP, and it's just magic how it just works. And one of the really big one that surprised us is because all of your packages are in one place, our developers just started being like, hey, you have this package, we have practically the same one, like a custom one. Can we just make a generic one and share it? And teams started to kind of like just share more packages and be more collaborative. And this was not expected. It was not in our requirements that developers can easily share it. But it kind of just happened automatically, because developers want to be smart or lazy, whichever one you want to call it. And they want to share that stuff. So I think that is really, really cool. And that was a really, really big benefit for us.
Yeah, that's great. Rob, for the Financial Times, what are some of the benefits you've seen since you've implemented Cloudsmith and moved to this centralized single source of truth for all your software assets?
Yeah, I mean, similar to the last point Antoine made about the ability for teams to now easily share kind of code artifacts and also Docker images that's a big win. I think I mentioned OIDC, so with that, it's we've been hit by issues with breaches in SaaS vendor suppliers that we've had to respond to, and that takes a lot of time. So moving to OIDC for us is just means we're not storing secrets that can be exposed. So that's, and certainly with the number of pipelines, the amount of effort it takes us to kind of reconfigure those in the event of a breach. Fortunately, it's only happened a couple of times, but these things do happen from time to time, and they're painful when they do. So we're keen on using OIDC everywhere we can, really. So yeah, that's the kind of big one. I guess the other thing is just visibility. So getting to the point where you can actually see what open source stuff is being consumed within the organization. You've got all the kind of the download logs, package logs. We kind of shunt those over into Splunk and then produce some nice dashboards off the back of that. So we're getting some interesting kind of stats on which teams are using Cloudsmith, which users, which packages, and that sort of thing. Yeah. So it's kind of giving us insight that we didn't have before.
Yeah, that's great. We're reaching the end of our time. Do either of you have any closing thoughts you want to deliver before we wrap up?
Well, for me, I'm being a little bit jealous of Rob here, because we are looking at implementing OIDC because we want to get rid of most long-lived credentials. And that was also back to the point that Cloudsmith feels like a partnership instead of being a customer. We were like, hey, we don't really want to enable OIDC on our production environments. Can we have a second account? And then kind of an acceptance environment where we can test it out before we do it to production. And the team was like, yeah, we definitely understand it. And here you go. And so for us, the next step is to implement OIDC and also get rid of all the long-lived credentials. But that, again, proves the point that it's a partnership, not just a customer.
Yeah. Rob, any closing thoughts on your side?
No, it's been a really kind of pleasant experience so far. It's as I say, that kind of partnership element is really key. And whenever we've had an issue, we just jump on Slack, ask a question, and you usually get a response, same day, within an hour. So yeah, it's been really easy from that perspective, and yeah, it's been a pleasure to work with the people we've dealt with at Cloudsmith so far. Yeah.
Great. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you both for joining today and sharing your experiences on implementing a cloud-native artifact management as part of your platform engineering journey. I really appreciate you taking the time and chatting with us today. As a reminder for the audience, if you're watching today on a social platform, you can use the QR code to register to receive a copy of the latest report from the analyst firm Omdia. Moving to platform engineering does not mean the end of DevOps. And also, Cloudsmith's next webinar is September 19th. I think Rob gave a shout out to the EU Cyber Resilience Act. So the webinar on September 19th will review that Cyber Resilience Act and its potential impact on the open source software community. You can visit cloudsmith.com/webinars to register or use the QR code on the screen below. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And thanks again, Rob and Antoine, for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thanks for having me.